In this video, I want to show you how to make the Snail cam in Autodesk Inventor. After you open Autodesk Inventor, you will want to create a new standard IPT file. Once your new file opens, we're going to create this cam a lot differently than we did the other cams. So first we want to begin by drawing two circles. And before I draw these two circles, I want to make these construction circles so that they are not permanent lines to the sketch. I'm going to choose construction and then go to circle and then start at the origin. I'm going to draw this circle. I want to make sure that I am set to radius, and I am. Notice that the dashed line starts at the center and goes to the outer edge of the circle. So I want this first circle to be 1 inch. So the radius of this circle will be 1 inch. So the diameter would be 2 inches. I'm going to draw a second circle at the same origin point, the same center. And this time I want this circle to be 2 inches. So the radius of this circle will be 2 inches. So this is a 4-inch diameter circle. Again, notice that these are construction circles and they are not finished circles. Next, I want to undo the construction option here so that everything I do from here on out will be actual lines that will be used in the extrusion and creation of this part of this cam. Next, I want to go to line, and I want to draw a line from this top quadrant of this outer circle to the top quadrant of the inner circle. So it'll be a solid line. Next, I want to make sure that, as with other points that we're going to create, there are points on this line and in this whole entire sketch that we need to make sure get locked in to very specific points. So for example, I'm going to go up here to my constraints, and I'm going to use the vertical constraint and make sure that this definitely is a vertical line, and it is. Next, I'm going to use the vertical constraint, and I'm going to make sure that this point of this line is always going to be lined up with the center point of these two circles. And so that way it can't shift. Next, I'm going to draw several arcs, and the arcs may not make much sense, but it will actually create the actual shape of the Snail cam, and we'll have to make some adjustments using the dimension tool to get it correct. I'm going to go to arc, and this will be the 3-point arc. I'm going to start this first arc by clicking on the bottom of this line here, and then the end point of this arc, I'm going to make about 25% from this inner circle. So 25% from this circle to this circle is about where I want this one to end. So about right there. And then I want to make sure that when I draw this arc that it doesn't snap to anything, that any kind of constraints come up and lock this in place. I want the ability to be able to change this a little later. So I'm going to click about right here. The next arc will go from the end point of that arc I just drew to about halfway between these two circles right here. And then I'm going to, again, make sure it doesn't snap to anything or it doesn't use any kind of tangent constraints. I'm going to set all that a little later. Next, the third arc is going to be from the end point here, and this is going to be about 75% from this circle to this circle here, so about right there, even though it's probably a little more than 75%. But I want to draw that, making sure that it doesn't snap to anything to lock itself into place. And then the last arc will be from here all the way to the very end here at the very top quadrant here. Again, I want to make sure that this arc, as I do this arc radius here, isn't locking into any particular part of this sketch. And that looks about good right there. Notice you see the overall shape of the Snail cam, and it still is not smooth. It actually has some little jagged pieces here, kind of points out some indentions here. So what we're going to do is use the constraints here and lock some more parts of this sketch together. First, I want to use the horizontal constraint, and I want to constrain the endpoints of these arcs right here to the center of the circles that I originally drew, so that they always stay in place. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the endpoints of these arcs. I'm going to lock them into the center here. Then I'm going to go to vertical constraint, and then I'm going to make sure that this endpoint of these two arcs is always in line with the center point here. So again, to kind of get an idea, go back here to show all degrees of freedom, and now you see the arrows. So for example, this little dot right here, the endpoints of these two arcs can move to left and right, but cannot move up and down. That's what I want. This endpoint of these two arcs here can move up and down, but cannot move left and right. And the same as this one right here, it can move left and right, but it cannot move up and down. We're not really too concerned about these other ones, but so that's pretty much what I want. And so I'm going to turn the degrees of freedom back off. Next, I'm going to go to tangent constraint, and I'm going to place a tangent constraint between this arc and this arc, between this arc and this arc, and then this arc and this arc. And you'll notice that it's starting to kind of go outside of what I originally drew. So before I do the next thing, I just want to hit escape on my keyboard, and I'm going to click on this point right here and just kind of drag it back in just to kind of allow this thing to shift a little bit. And then I'm going to place a tangent constraint between this arc and this outer circle. And again, it's starting to really distort itself, and that's okay if it does that. We're going to fix all that in a little bit. But you can easily click on these dots and kind of move them back around if you need to get this to look a little bit more like it's supposed to. So that's actually pretty close to what it's supposed to look like, but we're going to actually add a couple dimensions. We're still going to use the parametric feature here so that we can allow ourselves to change this later, but we're going to do the parametric features. We're going to change those a little later. So I'm going to place a dimension from the center point of the two circles that I originally drew all the way to the end point of these two arcs right here. And I'm just going to pull this dimension straight down. So I'm going to write a formula in just a few moments that locks this in to a couple things. And I'm going to hit the check mark. I don't care what it is right now. It'll fix itself when I do the next step in just a moment. Then I'm going to place a dimension from the center down to the end points of these two arcs here. I'm going to pull that to the far right. And then I'm going to place a dimension from the center point to the end points of these two arcs, and I'm going to pull that dimension straight up. Now we're ready to go to parameters, and I'm going to click on that option here. And you'll notice that the original circles that I drew first have names, D0, 1. I'm going to rename these. I'm going to call these diameter 1 and then diameter 2. So if you want to think about it this way, we made the first one 1 inch radius circle, and the second circle that I originally drew had a radius of 2 inches. So I've given those names. Now I had those three arcs, so I'm going to rename these. I'm going to call this one arc 1. I'm going to call this one arc 2, and then I'm going to call the last one arc 3. Now to set these so that we can easily go back and change these to later, and that these dimensions here, these arcs, are based off of these two circles, I want to write a little formula. It's very simple, and it may not make sense, but what I want to do is kind of zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you remember, I wanted the endpoint of these two arcs right here to be about 25% of the way between this circle and this circle. So obviously that's a little bit more than 25%. I'm going to write a formula that allows me to change this. And so what I will do is type in diameter 1 plus 0.25, which is, again, 25% times the difference between DIA2 minus DIA1. And so there's my formula. Let me kind of explain what that formula is and what it actually says here. So the endpoint of these two arcs is now DIA1, which is the radius, right, from the center to this quadrant here. So that was a distance of 1 inch, plus 25% of the difference between this circle and this circle. So we're actually going to write a very similar formula to the next two arcs. What I want to do is highlight this and hit Control C on my keyboard, and then I'm going to go to the next arc and I'm going to hit Control V. What I need to do here is change the 25% to 50%, because we want this, the endpoints of these two arcs here, to be halfway between this circle and this circle. So I can just click away from it, and you'll notice that it's changing these numbers to be exactly what they should be. And then the last arc, I'm going to go Control V, and then I'm going to change this 0.25 to 0.75. Again, that means that the endpoint of these two arcs will be 75% of the way or the distance from this circle to this circle. So I'm just going to click outside, and you'll notice now we have a snail cam that looks exactly like we want. So all the arcs are tangent to one another, they are locked in place, and it won't move around. Before I close out of the parameters box, I want to add a numeric parameter, and I'm going to call this one whole, and we've done this with the other cams. And I want this cam to be 0.26 as the others were. This is so that we can create the square hole through this snail cam. I'm going to hit done, and now I'm ready to draw the circle. I'm going to turn on the construction option and then go to circle and place the circle at the origin. Notice it is set to radius. I need to change this circle so that I place it based on its diameter. So I will right click and choose diameter. Next, I will just type in the word hole for my parameter. I'm going to turn off the construction option. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to go to polygon. I'm going to place a 4-sided polygon starting at the center. And we'll make sure that it goes to the quadrants of this circle. Next, I'm going to place a dimension on either side just to ensure that this is in fact the right size. And then I will do the same thing for this one. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure this square is going to be center. So I'm going to just put a couple dimensions here to ensure, and it looks like it is locked in place. So now I'm ready to finish my sketch. Go to extrude. I want to extrude this shaded area. My distance or my thickness for this cam will be 0.25, and I will click OK. You may want to add material to this, so I'm just going to choose PC ABS plastic. You may want to give it a color, so you can hit this drop down option, just choose a color. I'll just make this red. So to make changes to this cam, you can hit the FX or the parameters button here, and you can change your number. So if I wanted this to be 1.5 and then make this maybe 3, you could play around with those numbers later, but for the sake of just finishing this up, I will leave these at these numbers. But let's say you wanted to go back and change the size of the hole. You could change this number here, and it would change the size of the square hole here. But that is how you draw the snail cam in Autodesk Inventor.